Well, thank you everyone for staying with us on the program this morning. We're looking at our first discussion, which centers on the issue of data for national development, how data can help us jumpstart developmental issues across sectors in this country. I'm joined via Zoom live from Lagos, Felix Mafido. He is the CEO at Requid Technologies Limited. Felix, it's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Yes, Simeon, thank you for having me as well. Pleasure.
All right, great. Let's get right to it. Let's try to establish, for want of better words, a marriage between the importance of data and national development. Data, we have been told time and again, is a challenge because in Nigeria, for example, in many areas, there's so much of deficits as far as data availability and accessibility are concerned. What exactly is the challenge we're grappling with regarding data in Nigeria?
Okay, so so like you said, it's critical that every country, every entity, the company, whether you have a business, you run a country, you run a state, you run a parastatal, any kind of organization that you run, where you have myriads of people across different geography, different attributes, right? People who have different social class and stuff. So days will come where you ask yourself questions as simple as, so if you wanted to ask questions like, so we're bringing in, say for example, 20 million units of the COVID vaccine, right? But that's one easy way of asking that question. And then the question is, how do you distribute fairly, right? Not just fairly, but how do you distribute in such a way that the impact of that distribution will be felt to the extent that the rate of the spread of the virus will reduce drastically, right? The question is, how do you answer that question? It's difficult to answer, to be honest, because you'll be trying to get things as simple as the people who have COVID today, where are they located, right? How often do they get to public places? Because you want people who have a higher tendency of infecting others to have the vaccine. So if you were to answer that simple question, the people who have COVID today, what fraction of them use public services the most? Go to the malls, go to use public transport services, and all of that, right? How do you answer that question? Do we have data today that can provide an answer to that question, right? Or you run a small business, and then you want to know the customers who patronize you the most, who give you 80% of your revenue, where are they seated? Or where are they? How do I multiply that number by 10 tomorrow? How do I locate them if I were doing internet ads? How do I locate them if I were to go to the street and do any form of physical campaigns? That is how critical data is, right? Now the question is, do we have that data today? I wouldn't say yes. The answer is probably closer to a no. But the question is, why don't we have that data? A lot of things. For one, let me ask you, Simeon, say you travel, I have friends who have come from maybe the US in the last couple of months, right, or from the UK, and then things as simple as you come in 2 weeks, within the next, in 2 weeks' time, you have to go do maybe a test to ascertain whether or not you've been infected before you came in and all that. How many people have that discipline, to say, okay, yes, the government has said this, I'm going to do this, as said, right? Today, there are a lot of there are a handful of policies, on control of COVID, for example, right? And then the question is, how many of us are doing that? So there's the issue, we find it very easy to push the blame to the government, and people working in the public service. But a lot of the times, what I find is, every one of us, in our own way, we tend to make it kind of difficult, for the government to have data. That's one. Then secondly, I would say there's also been some level of indiscipline, or maybe for one of better words, lack of coordination, across the government agencies and all the other institutions who are collecting this data. So today we have things like NIN, we have BVN, we have, I'm not sure what else we have, but the point is, we have different points where we're collecting data, right? Right now, I saw a very funny story on the internet. Someone wanted to register his NIN, right? And then the requirement says that you have to provide your phone number. And now this guy has lost his phone number, but for you to retrieve his phone number, it requires NIN. So you see that's very interesting.
So it's trapped in between, obviously.
You get a phone number if you don't have NIN. So the point is, I think we need to sit down and maybe just think through a lot more on the dynamics of some of the data we're collecting. And how do we make it as easy? But that's another thing. The more stressful it is for people to provide you their data, the more likely they don't want to go through that stress. Who has the time to go and sit in a queue for the whole day, because the government is saying give me your data, for example, right? So I think there's still some kind of inefficiency in how we collect that data, and because of that, to a very large extent, it might still be difficult for us to be able to.
Okay, great. I want us to talk about something else, which you already mentioned in passing. By the way, you talked about the issue of the minister. I mean, you talked about BVN and the other issue a while ago, the NIN, and of course, there's also the challenge that's associated with the inefficiency, which you also talked about just a while ago. Let's look at the challenge, not just with data, but now the Minister of Digital Economy is saying that there's the likelihood that not BVN, that the NIN will override ultimately the BVN. In other words, at some point, you're going to have the NIN being the standard, the basic standard for data in Nigeria. And then you're wondering, why does that have to be? But again, the minister says, look, while the BVN is only a regulatory measure, the NIN is a law. So how would you look at that? I mean, how can you do a juxtaposition of the NIN versus the BVN, for instance?
Okay. So I think it still comes back to the fact that you have different institutions who are saying, give me your data, right? So, of course, we all know, thank you, power just went out.
No, it's okay, we can deal with that.
Yeah, so the NIN is, that's an initiative of the government, to have some form of identity for every one of their citizens, right? Of course, many years back, the initiative was born, and then we know how important it is to be able to say that, oh, this is Simeon Louis, right? Or this is Philip Semafidon. This is where it comes from. This is where he is right now, and all of that data point. This is the kind of person he is. If you were to class him by whatever, right? This is how we can class him. So that if we have, for example, social incentives, social initiatives, does Felix properly fit into this bucket, that we're trying to, that we're trying to reach. However, what we saw in the last couple of years was that the effort of the government itself wasn't as productive, productive more like in terms of having that initiative happen, right? And then, of course, the banks themselves needed that data for a lot of reasons. You need to be able to say that, Simeon has, it has an account with UBA. There's another Simeon who has an account with Best Bank. Are these two people the same? Your BVN is that thing that links this. That
distinguishes between people with the same names, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to go into the use cases for why it's important to have that. So, for example, you took a loan with UBA, and you run away, you don't fulfill the obligations of repayment, and then you jump to First Bank, you take another loan, BVN allows a bit of control and some kind of sync across your financial activity. Now the point is, the banks realized they also needed that data, but because government efforts weren't forthcoming, they decided, okay, why don't we, go one step further and do that? Like it happens everywhere with everything. Everything we have happening in Nigeria, mostly at the private sector, which kind of makes sense. But then the government itself still has need for a central kind of identity for everyone. So yes, I see a point where there will be some kind of marriage between both, which is more like the ideal thing, right? But then, if the government is saying the NIN is going to at some point supersede what the BVN is doing right now, it kind of makes sense. The banks are going to also latch onto that to further their own identity, central identity kind of need. Yes.
Okay, I want to ask you something again, Felix. I mean, you look at the ranks. I mean, as it were, the list of high-paying jobs for 2019, 2020, and in particular 2021. Amongst the first 10 highest-paying jobs, especially in developed economies, you will see data engineers, and then of course data analysts there. We don't seem to have much of those in Nigeria, do we, really?
Okay, so I guess your question is about analysis of data.
Yeah, and experts to do this analysis for us.
Okay, so how do you mine data? How do you ask questions on the data?
All right, no, more precisely, are we producing data engineers, data analysts, data experts, data pundits generally in Nigeria right now?
Yes, yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes. Even though the bulk of those people are working mostly in the private sector, right? Because the ability to, it's one thing to have data sitting somewhere. Oh, I have Simeon, this is his name, this is his age, this all of his, all the components are making data now, right? And it's another thing to be able to process that data, ask questions on the data, interpolate data, and say, okay, this is this guy here, this other person here. What are the common things? For those of us who watch movies, right? Yeah, you get to see movies where they're asking, oh, this guy is a crime lord. Who are his associates? Answering that question, who are his associates? There are a lot of data points, that you have to marry to answer that question. So yes, what I would say is, in Nigeria, we've had in the last maybe 3-4 years, data mining, data engineers, data analysts. Not just when you hear data analysts, you think maybe computer analysts and stuff. These are people who understand data, analyze the data.
Right.
It's a profession that we're beginning to see a lot of interest, largely because of a number of things. One, companies, so which is why I say private sector, right? Companies are beginning to realize that they need to be able to ask, like I said, in quotes, ask questions on their data. Right? So every time maybe you could be saying, for example, what states do people spend the most, right? At what time of day do these are simple questions, right? At what time do people spend the most? What are the things that influence people spending, so much money? They need to ask that question.
Yeah.
Is it close to festivities, or is it a function of boredom? That's a strange question. But then, if people, get bored and make more calls, maybe the telcos will be saying, how do we influence people to become more bored? So
you have to induce boredom.
Yeah. But point is, we in the private sector, companies are beginning to realize that they need to ask more questions on their data, and we're beginning to see that profession flourish here. And then another reason why that's also becoming a trend now is because the cost of hiring these guys is actually quite expensive. So people are seeing that as an area of opportunity.
All right.
We have very few of them right now. That scarcity also kind of makes it a bit more pricey, makes that profession a bit pricier than what you would have with the maybe computer engineers and stuff like that. So yes, it's a growing profession. A lot of people are beginning to gain interest and begin to take advantage of the opportunity, as it were. And then because of the need internally, companies are beginning to realize that, oh yes, we need people to help us, interpret our data. People are beginning to find reason to get into that. In government, I'm not so sure, how much of
that's in the public sector, right? Okay, let me before I let you on, let's just quickly look at this. I mean, data in itself is systemic. By way of coincidence, pleasant or otherwise, Nigeria is dealing with systemic problems as well. From where you stand right now, from your own assessment, candidly, what more? I mean, how much more work do you think we will have to do to get it right with data and then jumpstart development in this country?
Okay, so I'll say there's still a lot of work. Like there's still a whole lot of work. Let me paint this scenario, right? Most countries I see out there, that they say, okay, these countries are prosperous. The question is, how do these countries make money? Right now, Nigeria depends a lot, on things like, the funds we get from crude oil. Maybe more recently, the GDP is beginning to get some kind of traction from agricultural activities, both from primary production, export, and all of that. But now, let me think this. So I work with XYZ company, right? And I need to pay tax, which is for a lot of countries is a primary way of getting revenue or generating revenue, right? What's usually we call internally generated revenue. Now, but the issue right now is, as it stands today, a lot of people do not pay tax. So if I walked into the street of Benin today, right? I know most people will not be happy with me, saying this right now. Maybe your argument will be, Why should I pay tax when the government is not doing X, Y, Z, right? But the truth is, for you to have a sustainable kind of government, I'm also not factoring the fact that we have a lot of avenues for losses, corruption, and all of that. But then, well, let's assume everything is working right. The government needs to generate a lot of revenue from taxes, or at least maybe not increase taxes, but people who are supposed to pay taxes today, are they paying their taxes? The answer is no. How many people on the streets of Benin that have shops, that run their businesses, Instagram businesses, how many of them pay their taxes today, right? How do you get them onto your tax database? A lot of data points. For example, Chukudi, who wants to start an Instagram business, maybe selling shoes, right? What does he do? First thing, I have this business idea, blah, blah, blah. He walks into the bank, he opens an account. That is a data entry point, right? At that point, we should be able to say, Chukudi should be able to pay tax, right? On whatever, business that he's doing. How do we determine how much taxes Chukudi should pay? How do we determine that if he's paying as much as he should pay, right? As of today, it's still very difficult for the government to do all that, right? Enforce that, design strategies to ensure that those gaps are not there, right? So point is, there's still a whole lot, to do in terms of collecting the data of our citizenry. The guys who are in Maraba, in the north, how many of them are on the tax database? How many of them are on our social incentives database? I'm not talking about short-term, social initiative where we're saying, let's give 10,000 naira to, X, Y, Z people, right? If we ask the pertinent questions today, how many Nigerians are impoverished? And let's say there's a project, to reach out to them. How do we ensure that, to a very large degree, each of this class of people, right, are reached, with whatever incentives, whether you need to reach them in their homes, whether you need to reach them by their bank accounts, or whether you need to reach them via any other point is, do we have the data, to be able to do that? So there's still a lot of work to do in collecting, first of all, right, the data that needs to be collected, but for the government to be able to do a lot of its social, design the social infrastructure, execute the social programs and all of that. If you then go further to maybe things like you hear every day, somebody was kidnapped, in so place, they're asking for ransom, and it's as bad as the ransom. Some ransoms are even paid into bank accounts today. So you ask, who is this person that owns this bank?
Right.
Account?
Don't have data on this person.
Yes, absolutely. So the point is, there's still a lot. There's too many loopholes in terms of data collection. I saw something very funny recently. Somebody says, if you want to buy NIN, I don't know how true that is, but if you want to buy NIN, I already have NIN I can sell to you. That may not be true, right? However, I know this is true. You come in from Ghana today through the land border, people sell SIMs. In code, they tell you already
pre-registered SIM cards.
Yeah, you're saying
Pre-registered SIM cards, right?
Pre-registered SIM cards, right? And then people buy these SIM cards, and that's a loophole in itself, because if somebody perpetrated a crime with that line, that SIM card, the question is, who exactly are you going to hold? How do you get across to that person?
There'll be a blowback at some point, because you have to trace back the person's crimes to a particular person's information, right?
Absolutely.
So Felix, I want to thank you at this point, because we are really out of time. I wish we could do this for 1 hour long, but I know you are in the busiest, one of the busiest cities on the continent of Africa, and that's Nigeria's capital, Lagos. Felix Imafido, CEO at Recruit Technologies Limited, joining us live from Lagos this morning. I want to thank you so specially, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right.
Okay, this is the point where we're taking another break now, so we're going to bring you another interview just in a moment. Stay with me.